So at Archistar, we're really about how do you streamline all the processes from that development, understanding what you can do on your property, and making your life as easy as possible. So to do that, there's a lot of data involved, and we're using AI to really try and make the most sense of that data. And lately, I've been saying that a lot of these planning rules and what you can do on your property, it's grey. Like, it's not really black and white, but I sense, like, in the last 8 years that we've been working on this, the industry are looking for black and white transparency. So for us, it's how do you take all that data, how do you take precedent, how do you take context, and then how can you make something that's by nature grey, and try and make that black and white and give answers. So yeah, we're on that journey of trying to interpret data, bring that together, and use a lot of data.
And Nikki quoted a few stats around the reduction in price and time taken in planning. Have you got some stats of your own in terms of the Archistar model?
Yeah, I don't know what my latest stats are, but the amount of rules that we've digitized in the platform, it's in the order of millions of rules. And we were just looking at stats on how many designs get generated in our system, and I think monthly we're generating over 1.2 million designs every month from not us, like our clients. So if you can just imagine the amount of activity and data going through the system, like it's orders of magnitude above what
Yeah, you guys must have your own data center somewhere. Jessica, Neighbourlytics is an interesting one. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, so we started Neighbourlytics about 7 years ago, before AI was cool, or certainly before it was talked about in rooms like this, and certainly before I knew what it was, because I'm a placemaker, an urban designer for 20 years, and we created Neighbourlytics as a way to automate the way we understand the lifestyle of neighbourhoods. So we could see that there was huge value in seeing what people talk about on social media or how they spend their time in local neighbourhoods. So we were looking for a way to essentially digitise and quantify that side of communities so that you don't have to rely on always going out in the street and interviewing 1,000 people to try to learn that. So we have vast amounts of data. We get 10 million mobile phones every day across the country to look at how people move around neighbourhoods. And so we use AI a lot to be able to compute that data. So we've built our own models, and I think we'll talk about some of this, but we've had a huge learning curve in what works when you try to go off the shelf with AI, and not a lot does. You actually really need to be training your own models, and we've had a lot of experience in that, and also in the summarising of data. So we have vast amounts of data every day across the country, and so we use AI, particularly recently the generative stuff, to be able to instantly summarise the data, not to give that as the final answer, but to help us in our R&D to sort of shortcut some of the investigation, just like an overconfident intern. We absolutely would not, I love that I'm going to use that all the time. We absolutely wouldn't trust the generative AI to then give to our end user. We use it internally to sort of make our own investigations faster, and it's absolutely brilliant for that.
So you still need the human overseer over the top of that.
That's right. And something really interesting we're seeing at the moment is that just in the last 4 months, we are increasingly licensing our data to other providers. We're in the Archistar platform, but also a lot of our clients who used to use our platform are now licensing our data into their own AI models. And so that's a really big opportunity at the moment. They don't need to generate their own data and be doing all that manual work, but now that AI is so accessible, even local governments are doing that sort of thing and licensing in data to be able to draw their own conclusions with their other data sets.
How long does it take to train your AI to get it, or is it just constantly feeding the beast?
You're never finished, right? And that's because the training data has to evolve as well, because the type of the questions and the sort of the context that you're trying to draw from is changing. So we use a lot of image recognition, and we started using off-the-shelf image recognition, and we want to know when people post on Instagram, what is the reason they post it? Because when people post, they talk about, look at what I'm doing, look at who I'm with, or look at where I am, and that's brilliant insight for us as an industry to understand how neighbourhoods are used. But if you just use off-the-shelf AI, it'll say they took a photo of a bin, they took a photo of a tree, they took a photo of a dog, and it doesn't answer that question. So we've got our own model that looks instead at the purpose of the photo, using image recognition but with a different lens, and we have to continue to evolve and maintain that because the way people post online changes over time as well. So if we just used our model from 5 years ago, it wouldn't evolve now that motion is so much more of what people post, the type of people that post are different, so you always have to maintain it.
Andrew, you're coming at this from the Kapitol construction end of AI. We saw a few examples where it's being used on site. Is that something that you guys are looking at? How are you applying AI into the business?
Yeah, so obviously we're a consumer of products. Like we're not making the.
Sorry, are you getting that sound?
I'll talk loud.
There
we go. Yeah, so we're a consumer of products, of software products. So for us, construction is historically, for the last 30 years, you don't need to read too much to work out productivity has been a big problem. We're one of the least digitised industries. So we're sort of starting from a really, really fucking low base, if I'm going to be honest, as an industry. So we're Kapitol Group is 6 years in. We're one of the largest contractors in Melbourne now. We do over $700 million. We're one of the biggest data centre contractors in Australia, which is a nice synergy.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah. It doesn't help with the energy, but yeah, they're great. But what we found is that we sort of thought, we read the paper like everyone else, AI, all that sort of stuff. But it's actually really not a super straightforward thing to just roll out. Like what we've gone from is this time last year we had an IT manager. This year we have a CTO with a team of 10 people.
That's a big change.
It's a big change.
Ooh.
Yep. So yes, we do lots of products like the image captures. We have those. We do. We have people walking around on site with cameras on their heads, taking captures and images, and we do all those sort of things. And like, could I sit here right now and go, "Oh my God, it changes my life"? It doesn't. Like, it's more in the. I think a lot of this stuff is sort of beta still.
Yeah.
So, but we're all in that we know it's going to get better, and if we don't start that journey, then when we want to do it, we won't be able to do it. So.
Yeah. And one of the case studies she was showing was the defect and seeing anomalies within buildings. Is that something that you guys are on top of?
Yeah, we do that sort of stuff. We tried to get our staff to walk around with the camera on, and we worked out that we couldn't get them to walk in the same pattern like we needed them to. So now we've hired a person who's a professional walker-arounder, who walks around. It's a great job if anyone wants to apply. Get your steps up. So we do that, and we do that every week where we're checking the anomaly between our model and what we're building.
Yeah.
But like for us, you've got to go back. It's also like Revit's been around in construction for what, 20 years, 30 years?
About that, yeah.
I think if you really ask most contractors and subcontractors, it is not widely used by everyone. So we're actually getting to the thing of every project is a full Revit or Autodesk, whatever it is, project, so that we can get the benefit of all those. So there's a whole lot of foundational stuff that we've got to do to get the benefit of what this stuff does. So that's why we need a 10 by 10. Like, we mapped all of our processes. We did this journey of process mapping of 190 processes, and we worked out that 80% of our tasks are manual, which is horrifying.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's certainly not a third automation, is it?
We've got our industry is so ripe for disruption because it's been so disjointed and all that sort of stuff that there is so much opportunity. It's just really hard.
Rob, let's dig into NBN. You guys have, similar to Jessica, you use image capture to sort of help inform what you're doing out there. Can you tell us a bit about how NBN's adopting AI?
Sure, yeah. I mean, NBN's interested in AI because obviously all these great applications are going to be carried on the network. So we need to plan ahead. We need to build the network of the future to make sure that you guys can tap into that capacity that's required. But obviously internally within NBN as well, we use AI. We heard before we're a fast follower, but clearly we don't want to be left behind. So some of the examples that we were talking about before, image recognition, we heard that. So here's one. A lot of our contractors, when they've finished doing a work on a premise, they take a picture of what we call the NTD, the network termination device, to show that they've done the job. Now, we used to have a lot of contractors that would use the same picture over 20 houses, and just couldn't be bothered taking a new picture. So now we've deployed AI to actually make sure that every house has a unique picture. So there's an example of it was done manually before, and you can imagine that was a pain pain in the neck. And the other thing is, on our street furniture, we obviously get a lot of graffiti on those street furnitures, and we need to cover that up, and we need to cover some graffiti up faster than others. So you can imagine, words, bad images. We use AI now to actually look for those, so we can actually target the painters to the most offensive images first, and then maybe leave the Banksy for later down the line.
Yeah, I like that. Ben, can you talk us through the big New South Wales planning piece and how you're incorporating Archistar product into that?
Yeah, this is an interesting one, and we're seeing everything kind of evolve towards the government space now. So, when we started Archistar, it was all about the community, like the industry, developers, like what can I do on my property? What we realized was that, a lot of the issues we get is when you go to submit that to the council, to the city, and there's that disconnect, between I'm submitting this, is it gonna get approved or not? And there's a lot of subjectivity in that. What we've been working with the New South Wales government and cities around the world, in North America and others, is really looking at that bit of that approval process. And what we've developed up is technology that takes the same digital rules that we've done in the Archistar platform, but checks a design against those rules. And what that's being used as is a pre-check tool. So you go to submit, and then you check your design that it complies before you submit. Because this is being provided by government, you know that if you get those ticks, that it's going to get streamlined and fast-tracked. So,
well, I mean, you hope so anyway.
You hope so.
We are talking about New South Wales planning. But
yeah, so it's super interesting. The data off the back of that, we've been in many discussions with cities around the world that you can now, because every submission will be digitized, you can start to track which sections are failing, which sections people are having issues with, what could be grey, what could be tidied up. So I think over time you'll see that once you start using all this pre-assessment, you'll get applications streamlined faster.
Because you're training the people to the AI, or
it's a learning curve on both sides, right? It's like this does it, but you need the council to say, okay, we're willing to adopt this.
Do you think it goes the other way as well, though? Because obviously there's that feedback loop.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Will it change, I guess, the way that planning constraints are now, based on what people are putting forward?
Well, I was on a conversation just this morning before here with a city in Canada, and we were having a discussion about the accuracy of taking measurements off drawings, and quite often an architect will override dimensions, like this is 2 meters, it complies. But in reality, the drawing is not 2 meters, it's 1 meter and it doesn't comply. So our software will pick that up and say it's only 1 meter, it's not 2 meters, this is non-compliant. And there's this debate, it's should we go based on what the drawing is, or should we rely on what they're saying it is, which is not correct. And my argument there was that that's going to be someone's problem down the track. If you approve it and it says it's 2 meters and it's you comply, once you go to construct that, you're going to have issues. They're going to try and build it so it doesn't work. And then you've got all these issues down the line. So it's that balance between, you're going to get more accuracy. You actually also have to change your behavior on how do you respond to this? How do you adapt because previously, before you could do all these checks, it's okay, we'll just go based on whatever it says, But now it could be very different now. Yeah.
What are you seeing, Jessica, in terms of, I guess, the insights that you're getting and how they're being applied into industry?
Yeah, it's been an interesting time in the use of data in the property sector across the last 7 years, because there sort of wasn't that much 7 years ago when we started, and now it's like drinking from a fire hose. There's data everywhere and nobody knows what to do with it. And we've seen across that period of time a lot of organisations get really excited about the prospect of data, and this is about to happen to AI, and there's someone internally that becomes a chief data officer and they hire people and start evangelising it, and then there's not necessarily a lot of outcome, there's a lot of work and time invested to build something in-house, and then it doesn't, meet the needs, it's very difficult, it has to be maintained, and then now we're in a time where a lot of companies are going back to industry and using third-party suppliers like us to work with in that sense. So I'm bracing myself for that to happen with AI as well, is that it's great that there's a lot of enthusiasm in talking about it, but I would caution that it would be a mistake to then try to in-house everything and do a huge investment. I think Nikki touched on this, that it's great to immediately start trying to use it, but trying to use it doesn't mean an innovation department with a huge team who are the only people thinking about it. And the fact of the matter is now, with so much technology available, so many platforms, including ours, you can try for very low cost or no cost without needing to get into some kind of enterprise agreement. And so I think it's important to be thinking about, I think this is partly what you're touching on, Ben, in terms of the old way that planning decisions are made versus now, is be careful of the availability bias of just how you've always done something. And so bringing in technology, it can be tempting to say, oh, well, we just want to automate this step in a process that we've always done, but what you should be trying to do is disrupt the way work is happening. And so if you are starting to dabble in technology, make sure you're looking across the whole process, like the planning approval question, and think, is there a way that this whole process could be slightly better, and make sure that the whole team, everyone is thinking in that way, not just the innovation department. So, yeah. I'm yet to see what's happening in AI in that sense, but I do caution the innovation team approach. Sorry if those people are here. You're great as well. But
Shout out to the innovation team.
Yes.
Andrew, in terms of, there was a lot of discussion in the previous session around cost savings and time savings, and we know that, the industry is a bit fucked
Yes.
in terms of feasibility stacking up. And
Yep.
Is this an opportunity here to, I guess, move that needle? Can we innovate our way into something more efficient and get more projects out of the ground?
Yeah, look, I think we can. I don't think we're going to sit here next year and say problem solved, but I certainly think we can. I like to ask people the question, how much do you think we waste in construction? And the answer I get is always 15% to 50%. And that's not
That's
just
a pretty
rubbish.
big range, though.
Well, the low number's pretty big too. So, either's a problem. So, I think there's massive opportunity. I even ask of ourselves, a lot of the roles we do is we're just fixing problems that, when you think about an RFI, for example, what's an RFI if it's not a mistake? And the work involved in one RFI, when you actually map it out, is multiple hours of individuals' times. Probably an RFI is, each RFI represents for us and other organisations 15 hours work, and it shouldn't exist because you know what, the design's not right, and we probably could have fixed that had we thought about it, but there's a bit of a cost barrier. So if we start to fix some of those things, well, maybe work happens better. We've just moved to, we're doing it manually, we're not using AI yet. We're just moving to a job where we're going to model, it's an apartment building, so it's nothing too complicated. We're going to model every wall and every bend of every pipe so that every single, to the level of detail, and we're going to try and make it so that we don't want to see rubbish going out the bin.
Yeah.
Now, we're not doing that with AI just yet. We're doing it, we've got a drafting house out of India doing it to keep the cost down.
Yeah.
But we're going to model to that level of detail because we are literally just wasting money. We bring things in, we chop it up, we throw it in the bin, all technology that exists. So, the answer to the question is 1,000,000%. We really can make a big difference. It's just that it's hard because it's a big industry and it's been doing things for a long time, and it's hard to get that investment where lots of people that we need to improve will improve.
I do love driving past building sites where they've got the sign up, AI can't build this building. I'm like,
Yeah. I think that might make ourselves feel better. I think there's a big part of, I'm an enthusiast of Elon Musk. I don't love all of his views, but you look at the the robo-human type things. How long before that is a thing?
Is that on the horizon? Will we see that?
Well, the cost of a worker that you have to hire at the moment is pretty high.
Yeah.
So the price point for them to be better than a robot, a human worker for a simple task, that price point's, if you look in commercial construction, what we pay for a person a year, we pay a lot.
Yeah.
So, I think it's very feasible.
Yeah. We often hear that data is the new oil and it's, hugely valuable, and Jess and I think Ben also said it, we've heard it over the last few days, we've got so much data and we don't really know what to do with it. can we be doing more with it, and should we just be all tooling up? Should every industry be working in this space? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Data is the new oil. I mean, give you some figures. We talked about large language models. If you download like a Llama model to your phone, that's 8 gigabytes of data. Data. To put that into context, 10 years ago, that's what a typical household in Australia would consume. So nowadays we've rolled on typical households 440 gigabytes of data per month, and we see that growing. And we have a couple of charts. We have one that's the usual growth. We're not going to watch more than 5 hours TV a day. That's what we average at the minute. But we can see that we'll go to HD, etc., and that takes us about 30%. But we also have on our forecast a dotted red line, which is this unknown. So it's the unknown unknowns. When will holographic telepresence take on? When will robotics kick in? And talking about construction robots, if you can connect the robots, you don't need the GPU on the robot itself. You can offload that to the cloud, and you can timeshare a single GPU across multiple robots, and then you can run them 24/7, etc. And just one other point that's interesting, we talked about GPUs and the need for cooling and the power requirements. There's a company called Reset Data, and they're based out of Sydney, and what they're doing is they're putting mini data centers in the basement of buildings. They're liquid cooling the GPUs.
I've heard about this. It's amazing.
Liquid cooling the GPUs and then pumping that extracted heat through the building and heating the building.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win for both. You've got a localized data center, and you've got the extracted heat through the building. So data will always grow. It's just how fast it will come. And I think the key thing that we're doing is making sure that more and more of Australia is fibered up, because once we get a fiber to a building, that's it. We a bit like the old telephone lines that were put in the 1800s and the 1900s. Once we get a fiber to a building, we think we're good for 100 years. So that's what will deliver the data requirements that we've talked about.
And as we know, they just keep growing and growing. One of the things Nikki spoke to was digital master planning, and I'm keen to, I guess, get your ideas on where that's headed, because I don't know that we've done a great deal of it in Australia.
We, I think what she was talking about in digital master planning was like designing the digital, like underlying master plan. We've been doing work on the other side, which is actual master planning and fast tracking that and actually designing precincts, or you look at all the rezonings, how can you simulate that in a fraction of the time and run 10, 20, 30 simulations instead of 1 or 2, so you can get a better optimized version of that. But it's a super interesting concept of running a digital design throughout the precinct or the
I just don't.
Which is
I don't think we're doing anything in that space.
Yeah.
Is there any country in the world that's sort of leading AI in your collective opinions? Australia.
Us by far. I think everyone's on the journey, and I think there's a big learning curve. The explosion of what you can do, and the amount of companies that have emerged now that are AI companies, that are kind of like a little interface on top of ChatGPT. I think you've got to filter through the noise, because there's going to be a lot of it, and you'll search AI companies and there'll be, there was 100, and then there's 500, there's 1,000, there's 10,000. Like, there's going to be a lot. So what I found over our time at Archistar is, there's always so much data. Data is oil. Everyone's like data, data, data. And, the amount of data we've got access to is like mind-boggling. But putting all that data in front of people is not helpful. And we started by just, here's all the data, and then what we realized was that it's much better to go through that data, draw out insights, and provide the value. I think anyone can go and grab all the data and display it, but I don't think that's helping anyone. I think it's really bringing the subject matter expertise in, understanding what you want for that data, and picking the parts of that data and bringing that together to make sense of it.
I'll add to that, and I would answer that I think Singapore are doing amazing things with data and AI, and part of the reason for that is that when we work over there, the attitude or the way that the Singaporean teams are working with us is very, very different to the way our Australian customers work. So perhaps because Australia is earlier in its journey in data usage and property, I find Australians can make the mistake of thinking because there's more data, it will now have the answers and I can just get answers from data. But it's just like having a library with more books. It actually just means there's more information there, and yeah, you have a better chance of finding a great answer, but it's more work to get there. And so more data should just help you ask more questions and be more curious and learn faster. It doesn't give you the answers. And so it's a different way of working, because before data we had perhaps consultants' opinions, and a consultant will give you the answer, and I was one, so I can say that. But the thing with data is you do have to do the heavy lifting and do the thinking, you know, like with AI and the overconfident intern. And so, yeah.
Another thing on that is, if you want to do a comparison, we saw on the screen the AI grant for New South Wales, like 2.7 million grant to the council, which is great.
I thought it'd be more than that. Like, that doesn't sound like an insane
No,
amount.
comparison, Canada did a federal grant of 4.4 billion to cities to adopt AI and technology to fast track. So it depends on how much the government's willing to push it. We're seeing a lot faster adoption in Canada because they've been incentivized to make changes and to use technology to do it. So yeah, 2.7 mil, like it's a start, but I think there's about 16 councils that got access to that grant, you know, where there's over 120 in New South Wales. And you think about Australia, you know, like, so there could be a much stronger drive, and we're seeing in Canada, like, that's making an impact. You know, I think there's like 100 cities that got in the order of 20, 50, 100, 200 million to fast track permit approvals.
Interesting to see that level of investment as well, because obviously Canada has a really similar context to Australia, with similar, you know, things underpinning its economy, its housing crisis, etc. So maybe that's the bellwether for Australia.
Yeah, could be.
I mean, the key thing about data as well, you've got to worry, is obviously privacy, security, and also the quality. You know, I guess everyone, you know, the IT guys amongst us all know shit in, shit out. You know, if you've got bad data in, you're going to get bad results out. I mean, all that's really changed with AI and automation is we can throw a lot more data at the problem and maybe pick up on nuances that we couldn't in the past pick up on. But certainly if you've got bad data in, you know, we have a challenge with addresses, and you probably have the same. You know, 5% of locations, we don't quite have a correct address, and that's what causes us the most problems. It's not the complexity of the data, it's just that inaccuracy of the data.
Well, that's what we've found is to move to this, you know, well, let's be really tech, you know, future focused, is we have a lot of issues with shit data and trying to get that cleaned up, because we have lots of different sites doing lots of different things, and sometimes our clients make us use different platforms, and so actually trying to get the data to mean something and not be this really messy thing that the AI doesn't help with. Like, so we've started using Copilot, so we've rolled that out through the business, but again, it's really, we've got a lot of unstructured data, and then there's just so much work. And, you know, I was sort of listening before to the presentation, is like what we found is we've had to spend so much time and effort, like before we really get the benefits of what AI can do, actually building our foundations properly, which is what my CTO tells me always is we've got to build the foundations, because the data's amazing, we can do amazing stuff with it, but it's not clean, it's not structured, we can't get the right information out of it. It's a huge challenge.
And the other side of that too is not necessarily the unstructuredness of it, which is part of it, but especially when AI is in play, the bias in the data gets amplified with AI. And this is something that's not really spoken about much, but is going to be a massive issue, is that in a lot of the fear that comes from generative AI, whole segments of society are opting out of being part of the training models. So when Slack announced that in their terms and conditions that all the Slack conversations were going to be used in the training model, and then certain people started opting out. The people that are opting out are the more highly educated, mostly tech people who understand these things and read them. It means a certain demographic are no longer part of the training model, which means the training model has a massive bias in it.
Yeah, it's got a skew.
Yeah, and this happens with all sorts of data sets that we use, and that is a much more insidious problem and way harder to spot than just that the data's unstructured, and that's a huge issue to contend with.
Absolutely. We're running out of time, unfortunately, but I just quickly want to touch on, I guess, some of the hurdles that you've encountered so far and what you foresee will be the hurdles, particularly for the property industry in terms of adopting AI into the future. Rob, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, not property, but certainly on the ethics. You know, we've had people that opted out of co-pilot training on ethical grounds. You know, so it's going to be a journey. People are scared, and people, you know, are scared of change. And I think it's just, we all know we have to change, we have to progress. It's just how do you take the whole team on that journey? And I think it's a challenge for all of us.
Yeah, Terminator has a lot to answer for. Just joking. Andrew?
Yeah, well, even simple things like the previous one showed the benefit of photo capture and images and safety and stuff like that. But we have issues where we have workers who don't want their photos taken. So there's all this benefit of safety, quality in that we can use with the models, but then people go, I don't want my photo taken. And that's in a lot of actual EBAs that we're not allowed to do that. So there's technology bumping into people going, oh, I don't want to be part of it.
Yeah, that's a difficult tension to deal with, Jessica.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think the opting out is problematic, not just because it makes the sample size of data asymmetrical, but it's sort of a lazy way to deal with the problem. We should be dealing with the root problem of like, what is it about people's data they don't want captured, and solve that problem, because opting out doesn't solve that root problem.
I think in this industry in particular, the data itself is very challenging. So you're seeing all this great stuff happen, but every council is unique. Every building is unique. Everywhere around the world, like, it's very unique. So it's bringing all that together, and they're not congruent. It's not the same data. So I think one of the challenges we're going to have is, you know, to get really good models, it has to deal with the complexity of what's there. And I don't think it's easy enough to say that just simplify everything, because I don't think the government's just going to say, oh, we've just revised every planning rule, it's all the same now. So you, in the short term to medium term, you've got to deal with the complexity that's out there, and that's not an easy task.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and insights today. Fascinating discussion. Please thank my best guests, Ben Coorey, Jessica Christiansen-Franks, Andrew Deveson, and Dr. Rob Joyce. Thank you.